Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this Tuesday. Keep having to check, Jessica. I'm like, is it Tuesday or Wednesday? And it goes to say, welcome again to Storytelling for Support, Crafting Compelling One-Page Funding Proposals. My name is Karis Adams, pronouns she and her, and I work with Mid-America Arts Alliance as a professional development specialist. I'm partnering with Sixto along with a few other service organizations to bring Jessica today. One of the reasons we are hosting this workshop is for those that are invited to have a conversation in the second round of the Cultural Treasures Accelerator Initiative with BANF. We'll be able to bring a one-pager. We're hoping that you can come and bring something that explains the work that you do all within one page, why you do what you do, and how you do what you do, and your impact. In the highly competitive grant landscape, the ability to capture the essence of your organization and its needs in a clear, concise, compelling, and consistent way is invaluable. This workshop is designed to empower Houston's art ecosystem by providing resources to organizations to craft effective one-pagers for grant applications. This is something that we all need, we will always need forever and ever. And we brought the THEE, Jessika Davidson, to help us with that. Jessica is a marketing and engagement strategist that has worked with a variety of nonprofit organizations on their marketing and engagement strategies and platforms since social widgets were a thing, and MySpace was still the space. I remember when I was Pink Panther. Don't know why. I don't know why, 6-0, but I was. It was the time. Throughout her decade-long career, her work has been dedicated to cultivating inclusive and equitable communities across diverse impact areas, employing the power of compelling storytelling. She is a fierce believer that the work we do in our lifetime should be energized by purpose and strategic action. She has worked with the African American Culture, Houston Museum of African American Culture, National March for Science, Buffalo Soldiers National Museum, and Mid-America Arts Alliance. And with that, I will kick it to the Jessika Davidson.
Thank you, Karis. I don't know if I can live up to the THEE, but I'm going to try. Hi, everyone. I'm excited. I'm saying hi, everyone, because I do webinars across the country sometimes, but we're in Texas. So, hey, y'all, I'm Jessica. Karis already spoke to my background, but let me tell you why I'm here. I particularly love working with smaller cultural arts programs because I've been in your shoes. Right. I've worn many hats. I have been a program director, a program and marketing director, development and communications and program manager, and all at different Houston art organizations. I've been a consultant in-house, part-time contractor in-house, and then also working with organizations throughout the South primarily, but also some organizations in the Midwest and in California. So I've been in your shoes. And so to say that is also to say that I want to provide practical advice because I know that with smaller organizations, you might be wearing 15 hats. You might have a full-time job and this is a passion project. You might be a volunteer board member. I've been that person too. So what we're going to prepare you with today are practical insights and guiding questions to help you build a powerful story for your organization. And then we're going to pull out those strategic insights and that clear focus to help you develop that one pager. And something I've found as someone with a marketing and communications background is that storytelling has been one of the most impactful ways to connect with my core audiences internally and externally, as well as funders. And so I love to have engagements in person because I like the call and response. I'm a Southern girl, right? So I like to call out and hear your perspective. And so I welcome you to post any questions that you might have in the chat, and I will follow up in the Q&A segment. And then also what we're going to have is really a comprehensive framing so you can refer back to some of the insights that I share. If you're like me, I have a friend and a colleague who says that people have different ways of processing. Some people are toasters and some people are slow cookers. toasters grab the concept and they go with it. Slow cookers have to think low and slow, like brisket, and I'm a slow cooker. So I'm hoping that you reference this as you build out your organization story. And these are evergreen enough that you can also refresh this over the years using these guiding questions. So there's data that backs that stories are important. And they actually have a direct connection to a greater impact on charitable giving. And why? Because we're human at the end of the day. We are wired to respond to emotion and to love stories. So taking a storytelling arc or approach to how we talk about our organization is crucial for engagement. I've also been a grants panelist before. And so it's really important when you're not just answering the question, when you're involving the person on the other side of the paper, on the other side of the proposal, inviting them to be part of your organization through a story. So today we'll cover one-pager components, crafting the narrative. We're going to start with scaling out, right? Thinking about the larger narrative. So the goal is that you will write all that you know down, get all the data points, have a compelling narrative that you can actually repurpose in multiple ways. And then we'll zoom in again and talk about how you can pull from that information to craft your one-pager. We'll also talk about some visual design principles and then customization for different funders. I'm going to go through this as fast as I can in an efficient way so we have time for Q&A, because as I said, that interactive component is really one of my favorites. So cultural arts organizations need a straightforward framework to outline the story, why we must act now, the strategy, how we must act now, and the action, what we must do to act now. And this is based off Marshall Gaines' framework for organizing, which is really for social impact organizations, but it works in the same way for cultural organizations. I also tell my clients all the time, so what? After a story, that's the first bullet part. What now? That's the strategy. And the action is, let's take action. Let's do it. So as an exercise, if we were in person, I would ask everybody to take out a Post-it card or a piece of paper. And you can do this in your own solitude, but you can also, if you're one of the brave ones, post it in the chat, summarize the main goal of your organization or the project you want funded in one sentence that guides the rest of your narrative. We want to start with a baseline of where you are. And then after I give you some insights, we're going to do that again right before the Q&A to see how you've used some of those insights that you just got to kind of inform how you can reframe your language and your messaging to make it more compelling. So critical elements for your one-pager. Story, strategy, and action. We talked about that framework. Let's break it down. The story is the organizational overview and mission. You might also have some history in there. Then you want to go to the artistic and cultural relevance. Think about the landscape that you're in, from your positioning within your art form, your positioning within Houston's landscape and the diversity of it. And then you want to discuss your offerings and programs. And this is really your opportunity to talk about the data points and what you collect and showcase your current impact. And then we start to move up that storytelling arc into strategy. What's the vision for impact? What are the challenges? What are the critical points that you need to address through funding and support that will get you to that vision? And then your current funding strategy and objectives. What are you currently doing for sustainability? How are you going to be responsible stewards of donations and support? And what are you going to accomplish with that? Last is that action. This is your last impression that you get to make. So a strong call to action and engagement opportunities. Something I've learned as a development director before is that beyond asking for funding and support, this is an invitation to really become part of that work. I want to see you come to some of our events. I want to follow up via email and show you photos of what your support is funding. It's really about cultivation, and this is just one of those extra steps in that cultivation process. So building your narrative. There are 4 core storytelling techniques that these are one of the key takeaways from this session today, that you need to have this as the foundation of your storytelling. So as I said, we're not going to talk about getting to short and simple. We're going to actually write what we know first and pull out the most engaging parts. with the goals of having clarity and simplicity. So you want to be clear and concise. When you get to that one pager, having focus, you want to be able to tap into and identify the single most important point that you want to convey and weave that throughout your story. Emotional connection. We are humans after all. So you want to have those empathetic stories, those pull quotes that showcase your impact. But you also want to establish credibility as an organization, showcase how you've been in the community and of the community. The data, this is where that comes in to establish that credibility. So it's important that all of these elements are present in your storytelling. So you'll see roots and rhythm throughout this presentation, and I'm just letting you know that this is a made-up organization for the sake of having a case study. And so I tried to think about what is a small organization? Where are they at as far as they might have been around almost 15 years? They might be a dance organization. Their structure is pretty, small, but not unlike other small organizations in Houston. They have contractors, co-founders who are married and have full-time jobs as educators. They have a volunteer board, and they have just went through a strategic plan, and they've decided that the Step Forward campaign is going to strengthen their operations over the next 5 years with $250,000 in new funding. Here's some other background when you see roots and rhythm throughout as an example. They collaborate with a lot of local organizations. They are in school districts. They offer a range of classes, and they have a lot of community engagement for cultural events and programs as well. So let's talk about the story, the so what. I have, as a founder of my own consultancy, I can talk to you all day, every day about why marketing is important, why I love this work. And someone can say, oh, okay, and walk off. And so I do that a lot with my clients, because if you are passionate, and as a parent, I know this is an extension of yourself, right? This is your baby as an organization, or you've been a volunteer and now you're a full-time staff member and you've seen the growth. I always ask my clients, so what? Because that gets them to start thinking strategically instead of just being informative and talking to the funder, talking to the audience member, talking to the individual donor. What is the strategic framing of why this is important, and how can your audience see themselves in the solution, see themselves in the future of your organization? So let's start with the first part of that framework we mentioned earlier, the organizational overview. So what should be included in this? Your mission statement, what's your core purpose, your organizational history, very brief. How and why was your organization founded? Particularly if you have a very interesting or fun story. Your unique value, what makes you stand out from other organizations? And then an emotional hook. This is an opportunity, whether it's in the history part, whether it's in the story of the current founders or staff, to have a story that personally resonates with the reader. This is also an opportunity to throw in a testimonial. Here's some guiding questions that can get you through writing your organizational overview. What inspired the founding of the organization? How does that inspire your work today? Let me give you an example. When I worked at Buffalo Soldiers Museum, it was founded by Captain Matthews. His grandson is currently the CEO. Legacy. Every day when we started at work, it was legacy, legacy. This is my legacy, and we are building on legacy. And if you are here, you're part of that family legacy as well. And we used that to inspire the work that we did every day. And we also made sure to keep that into our storytelling, because that was important not only to the founder, but to how we establish vision for the future. So thinking about how the founding inspires the work today is really important. How does your mission align with the needs and values of your core audience? And then what are one or two unique aspects of your organization that a new funder or donor should know about immediately? So we won't do this for every section, but for the intro as well as the ask, I'm going to just use an example using our case study. So I'm not going to read this whole part. You can go back and reference it. The parts that are highlighted in red, You start with the hook. Roots and Rhythm empowers children of all backgrounds to explore their full potential in dance, education, and life. That's already compelling. Everyone loves kids, but then also it lets you know we aren't thinking about just movement. We're thinking about social emotional health and well-being. We're thinking about physical education and body movement. We're thinking about social interaction. We're thinking about education and history. So there are so many different elements in dance programs that I think go overlooked. And so having that compelling opening already opens up the possibilities of the organization and what it can achieve if it's to see its vision through and get the appropriate funding, right? So then also the second highlighted sentence, this approach enriches their overall dance education and personal growth, ensuring that every step they take, both on and off the dance floor, resonates with deeper meaning. Once again, connecting to how our program really enriches the overall lives of participants, not just a one-time interaction or a once-a-week interaction. Then we jump into the history a little bit. It's really important to establish that credibility. It was established by a dynamic husband and wife team who met as accomplished dancers at Juilliard. It started as a modest after-school program in the wife's classroom, driven by our observation of a significant gap in culturally relevant physical education and arts programs. So that's the unique element. They noticed the gap and they felt tasked, compelled, they felt full of purpose to fill it, particularly in underserved and minority communities. And another thing that's very important is mentioned is they believe strongly in making these programs free or low cost to increase accessibility. The last part of a good introduction is showing growth, which we will use other data points moving forward, but it's really helpful to have that growth at the forefront of your introduction and of your proposal so people can already see the scale. So since its inception, it has grown from serving 35 students in one class to over 10,000 students across grades K through 12 annually, with 87% of students attending our programs for 3 or more years and 93% of participants reporting improved physical fitness and emotional well-being. So what are your most compelling data points and how can you use that in your advantage for your first impression? After you do your intro, you're going to jump into cultural relevance. You really want to showcase where you fit in Houston's art ecosystem, or if you're applying for funding at a regional or statewide, how do you fit into that? Detail how your programs and initiatives support or enhance the local or regional cultural scene. Talk about community partnerships. This is a great time to brag on yourself as well. So mention any cultural recognitions you have or awards you received, and then overall community impact. Are you focused on a particular group, whether it's veterans, whether it's English language learners? What populations are you serving, and how are you fostering greater arts, educational, and cultural inclusivity? So while you're writing this part, you have some guiding questions that can help you build out this part of your narrative, which includes how does your organization reflect or enhance the cultural diversity of your community? What gaps are you filling from a cultural education or artistic standpoint? And how do your programs foster a greater understanding and appreciation for cultural heritage among participants in the audience? So this is the data part. I have a love-hate relationship with the data because I have worked with all forms of CRMs and not CRMs, Excel spreadsheets and paper surveys, all the way up to Salesforce and Blackbots. But you know, even if you have that love-hate relationship, it's incredibly important to track important data because funders are looking for this. So this section of your narrative should include a concise overview of your main program areas, activities, initiatives, tangible ways that your programs influence participants, what changes do you facilitate, and what value do you provide to internal and external stakeholders. Again, positioning. Do you have any special methodologies? Are you creating customized, radically responsive curricula, arts curricula? Data, participation numbers, demographics served, artistic outputs. So I'm not going to read all of these guiding questions. I think it's really important to talk about a few. So one of the questions is, what is the participant and audience engagement process? It's very important to talk about how you bring people into the relationship pipeline with you, right? So as a marketing and communications professional, it's like you can't just say we have 4 social media profiles and a website. You can say we do annual and quarterly campaigns targeting veterans, and we make sure that we build a relationship with them in order to make sure that they come annually to our Veterans Day programming. Thinking about that, and then also thinking about the age ranges, backgrounds, and socioeconomic profiles of the participants is very important, because as you're writing this out, you might notice that you're not capturing enough data or the right data. So I want you to use this to recognize where the gaps are for your data collection efforts. Some funders fund projects in certain zip codes. Some funders want to know, especially if you're working with schools, like what is the underserved population at the schools you're working with. For some funders, want to work with elders. So you have to think about, am I capturing that data so I can really communicate the impact that the organization has? So this is the next part of our story arc, right? So we talked about story. Now we're going to talk about strategy. So we went from so what to now what now? How must we act? This is our vision for impact. So what this section should include is, what are the key challenges you're dealing with as an organization, both externally? We already know that arts funding is, dwindling, a little scarce. It depends on the economy, it's locally and nationally. What demographic shifts are happening that are impacting your organization, and also internal needs, infrastructural needs, resource limitations. If you're a staff of 2, that's definitely a key challenge for your growth and your sustainability. You want to mention the impact of those challenges on your mission. You want to answer the question, why are these mission critical and need urgent funding? But you also want to be a resilient solution finder and go, okay, these are our challenges, but here's the future outlook. Here are the planned initiatives to address those challenges. Here's how we're going to reach sustainability long term. And you want to have the anticipated effects, if you were to get funded, available. If we're getting funded, we know we can double the amount of kids we serve every year. And then in 5 years, we'll be able to go from doubling that amount to tripling that amount, which is really ambitious, but I'm giving an example of knowing how that's going to happen. And we know that we can expand to 6 new zip codes, or that we can, if we make renovations to our building, we'll be able to host more events and add 10 new community partners. So have that futurist mindset and that future outlook as part of your vision for impact to address those challenges. And here are some guiding questions, of course, because I'm going to always have those for y'all. How are these mission critical issues preventing your organization from fully achieving its purpose? How have you adapted so far to meet those challenges? Because they also want to see, how resilient you've been and how you can pivot. Because even with funding, unexpected things can happen. I can say from experience, we know we're in Houston, natural disasters happen during capital campaigns. So you need to showcase that you've been resilient in the past and that you are always strategic and you can pivot at any given need. Any given need. Then also think about how you'll measure and report on these impacts to ensure they align with your strategic goals and community needs. Also, what innovative approaches are you considering to improve program delivery? Are you thinking about taking a hybrid approach if you get the right equipment to be able to live stream some of your things? Are you thinking about, if you're mostly located, say, in Missouri City, working with different organizations that are within the loop so you can attract a more diverse population? This is a great time to really set out that goal board and wish list and attach strategy to it that funding can support. And let's talk about the funding strategy. I had an amazing mentor who told me that it's always hard to get the first and the second funder, because nobody wants to be the first person to give you money. right? Maybe outside of your parents or a family member or a best friend. But if you're talking about big dollars, you want to showcase that you don't have a single source funding the majority of your operations, and that you are being strategic in corporate giving, individual donations, um, foundations. And I'll say this, you might be on the other side of this webinar going, I'm one person. I cannot do an individual strategy, a corporate strategy. You still want to showcase diversity where you have the most opportunity. Individual giving is hard to do. So if that's something that you have to start from scratch, focus on diverse funding sources, maybe at the corporate and foundational level where you'll have some support from your board or maybe from your CEO with different relationships. But one single source cannot be it. Then specific funding goals. So measurable funding objectives that support your strategic plans. So when you get to $20,000, if you need $100,000 in new funding over the next year, what does that mean for the organization? So some of the guiding questions that can help you here are, how do you plan to diversify and stabilize your funding sources? So say you get a call and you get the 25K, you get the 50K, the 100K as a fundraiser. That is great. You're like, I'm going to hire somebody for 2 years. Well, retention should be a goal. So we should already be thinking about how we're going to fund that person for 5 years or 10 years. So we can have that programming. And so we can have that continued sustainability as an organization and that continued growth as an organization, and how you serve the community. So thinking about not just diversifying, but stabilizing for long-term success. And then what are the key milestones and timelines for scaling once you reach funding? At what point, if you're doing building renovations, at what financial point do you start to break ground, or do you hire a general contractor? Have you already engaged an architect? Things of that nature, showing that you're already thinking strategically with what the support can and will do and then on what timeline, are really helpful. So now let's talk about pivoting to action, what we must do to act now. So now you've answered the so what now, and now it's take action. So the call to action and how to engage, and we talk about this later on in the presentation, but one of the most common pitfalls I see is that you don't ask for the money. That's the whole point, right? So you want to ask for the money, you want to be direct. So what this section of a narrative should include is the impact of a funder's support. So detail those tangible outcomes, talk about how it would extend beyond monetary to help the cultural enrichment of the city, of the community, and then educational advancement. Make sure it's urgent. So reinforce that this is an urgent need and it must be done, right? And then avoid open-ended general operating support language. So frame your funding request around specific programmatic or capacity building initiatives. I know I have dreamed, and I mean, I really have had maybe 4 or 5 dreams that Mackenzie Scott has called me and said, you have $20 million, do whatever you want with it, right? And if you are a funder long enough, well, if you've been a funder for long, you'll have somebody say, well, can you reach out to like Bill Gates? I heard the Gates Foundation is doing this. So we all have those dreams. Those are unicorns. And I mean true unicorns. And so we have to think more strategically about framing those requests around capacity building and using that language versus general operating support. So here are some guiding questions that can help you. So what unique aspects of your mission or programs can inspire potential donors? And how can you articulate the urgency? What is the risk of inaction? And that's a really important question. And how will the community be affected if the challenges persist and you aren't funded? It's really hard to think about the worst case scenario, but thinking about that can help you build your overall story, your pitch, whether you're doing it in person, on a one-pager, whether you're doing a walkthrough with a funder. Think about what will happen if this fails and build your story backwards around that. So here's an example using our Roots and Rhythm case study. from the beginning of our conversation today. So if you want to close out, we would say, we believe diversifying who is on stage, who's in the audience, and whose stories are told can transform the performing arts in Houston and beyond. Your support of $20,000 will directly fund the expansion of our transformative dance programs into more schools, the development of innovative new curriculum materials, and the availability of scholarships to ensure that students from all backgrounds can access these life-changing opportunities. This investment will allow us not only to continue our impactful work, but to innovate and adapt our offerings to better meet the evolving needs of Houston's diversity. Help us build upon our legacy of access, opportunity, and excellence, empowering the next generation of dancers to find their voice, explore their creativity, and unlock their full potential. This is key, and this is why this is highlighted. The time to act is now. Without your support, we risk limiting the reach and impact of our programs, denying countless young people the chance to discover the joy and power of the performing arts. Your partnership is essential to ensuring a more vibrant, inclusive, and culturally enriched Houston for all. Make them the superhero of the story. Funders typically like that, especially if you have other funders, I've learned, because they want to join in on the superhero praise as well. So make sure that urgency is there. So work smarter. When you step back, if you go back and review some of the steps and guiding questions, and you're working on this, you might have 10 pages of content at the end of this, because you've listed out all the data collections, the whole history of the organization. That's good. You don't want to think about being brief. We can find the things to pull out of the one pager. You want to have this. And why? Because if you're wearing multiple hats, if you're part of a small organization, you got to work smarter. You got to learn how to repurpose that narrative content. And so this list here, these are ways to repurpose that. Annual reports. I'm someone who would rewrite my narrative probably twice a year, as we change programs, as we pivoted. I went through a few strategic plan processes in-house, so you definitely have to rewrite the narrative. And so that gives you an opportunity at least once a year to use some of that same language in your annual report. Social media, if you find really, really compelling data points or a great quote, take that quote, put it in a Canva template, push it out on social media. Create some video content around some of the history of the organization. You can use this long form narrative to really help your marketing and communications in multiple ways. The same is with your website. You can update your website so you can have that cohesiveness. As someone who was a grant panelist, we have to do our due diligence too. So we're not just looking at the application and going, When we would meet, everybody would say, well, I went to their website or I went to their social media pages. So you want to have, what friends and I call one band, one sound. So you don't want to say that you've impacted 300 people on your website, but your proposal told me you impacted 1,800 people. So there's a mix up there. There's an inconsistency. So make sure that you have that one band, one sound on your website by pulling from that narrative. Volunteer and staff trainings and onboardings. This is very important. You want to make sure that everybody has enough knowledge, even as a volunteer, especially if they're a long-term volunteer. If you have a building and someone sits at the front desk for multiple hours a day, they need to know enough about your organization when visitors come in. New staff, this can get them up to date on your strategic goals, on the history of your organization. When I have worked in-house, I have always created something called By the Numbers for my organization, which is a one sheet. And that one sheet has all of our stats, participants served, programs, our top 5 donors. So everybody who is a volunteer or a staff member can have that information, and we can have consistent communication. And even our board members got it as well. Just in case they're out in the field talking to somebody about being a board member, they have those impact numbers that are really compelling. You can pull all of that from the narrative. And then developing media talking points. Same thing, you can expand on that by the numbers, add a few sentences about key talking points so you can be ready when the press actually comes to you or when you're doing press outreach with compelling information about your organization that might be relevant or timely to anything that is in the current media cycle. Donor communications. Use some of this narrative, use some of these testimonials you've gotten, use these quotes to build out email campaigns, end of year, large campaigns for fundraising, even some of the peer-to-peer toolkits that you might be doing. All of your donor communications, some of that strategy information, that data can all be pulled from this long form narrative. And then corporate partnerships and affinity group workshops. I have worked at organizations where we had corporate partnerships. So you can use some of that narrative content to build out a slide deck to talk more about your organization in a compelling and engaging way. So we have this narrative and now we want to make it into a one-pager. How do we avoid the pitfalls of what information we should be pulling out and how to build out a design when we just have one page? A common pitfall is trying to include too much information on one page. It becomes overwhelming. So what you can do is have your narrative in your Google Doc. If you're like me, I put pen to paper and start highlighting and prioritizing relevant information by its impact. You can use bullet points and break away from paragraph form to communicate. You can include a link to a website and PDFs if you're submitting anything digitally, or attach supplemental, excuse me, documents if you need to, or if you can. A strategic question that can guide you while you're pulling this information out is, what are the top 3 messages or pieces of information that are crucial for the funder to know about this project, this initiative, this program, or our organization? Another common pitfall is failing to have a clear central message. Think about those core elements of storytelling that we discussed earlier. Focus was one of them. You gotta have that clear objective that guides the readers and funders' understanding. At the beginning of our session today, I said that I would love for you to put in the chat or write down a summary of the main goal in one sentence. We're gonna ask that again, but that's the strategic question that you can use to guide your answers, and then have a strong, clear statement of purpose, and weave that central theme throughout your one pager as well. Another common pitfall, using an unattractive or confusing visual design that distracts from the content. So we, just like when you go to a restaurant and they tell us that we eat with our eyes first, just naturally we respond to visual elements first before we read text. And that's a human nature thing. So we want to make sure that we are employing consistent and readable fonts and relevant images and graphics without overwhelming. So if you don't have brand colors, Canva actually has some resources, and we will be talking about those resources on YouTube that can help you build out some of those brand colors that are complementary and use color theory. There are ways like, for example, yellow inspires action, and red says urgency, blue is calm. So thinking about how to use that in a strategic way and what feelings do you want to evoke when you have a funder or a reader in front of your one sheet or any of your design collateral, but particularly for this one sheet. So the strategic question is that you can ask yourself is the layout inviting, and does it guide the reader's eye to the most important information effectively? So a real big problem is using the same one pager for different funders without customization. So adapt. A great thing, and we're going to talk about this in Canva as well, is having just a simple document that is like your foundation. Make copies. And if you know that you do a lot of work with children, have a version that is in language that talks about your children's programming and your educational programming. If you know that you serve the African American or the Asian community specifically, and you know some funders are particular about funding projects that explore Asian identity and culture, make a copy of your foundational document and change the language and tone and use the data points that speak to that funder's interest. The strategic question that you can ask are, have I included specific elements that connect directly to their priorities? And we'll talk about some of the data that you want to collect and have available, either in a spreadsheet. I would prefer a spreadsheet in your database if you have that technology, or worst case scenario in a Google Doc that can speak to the different data points and the ways that you can do some customization. Another common pitfall is including data that is not relevant or impactful or presented in a way that's hard to understand. I have read some grant applications where the data is buried in paragraphs. So a few things you want to do. You want to have data that directly supports your narrative and demonstrates impact, but you also want to use the visual elements you have at your disposal. If you're using something like Canva, you don't have to build it from scratch. You can put the data in and it can formulate a graph or a chart, and you don't want to overwhelm. You might have so much good data. Stick to 3 to 5 data points to highlight on paper. And if you have a one-sided one sheet, I would say no more than 3 data points. A strategic question to ask yourself is the data that I'm including directly supporting my narrative? And if someone had 30, 60 seconds to glance at it, would they be impressed by the numbers that, that you're sharing? And one of the biggest problems, and we talked about this earlier, no clear request or desired action. So you want to ask yourself, is my call to action clear and compelling? And does the funder know what they're supposed to be doing next? If they love everything about your application, your proposal, your one pager is great. Okay, so what do you want me to do next? How much money do you want? Who should I contact? This page doesn't have an email address or a person of contact. You want to make sure that you have that clear request from the funder and who to connect with to build on that relationship. So if you don't know, and I think most of us probably know, because Canva is the best thing ever. I've made this presentation on Canva. I am a Canva ambassador for free because I love it that much. I've been using it for almost 10 years now. Canva is free for nonprofits. You do have to apply. It has, it's been better. I've had as short as a 1-day turnaround for clients, but also is up to a week turnaround for clients. It gives you all the features of Canva Pro, which expand every year, for free. And it would typically be around $12 to $15 a month per user. So please take advantage of Canva, especially if you don't have a connection or a person who's doing your visual design, because it's really important to make that great first impression visually as well. If you're wondering why is it important, have you ever been to a website in the last year or two that feels like it was possibly made when Windows 97 was like the biggest operating system at the time? What was your reaction to that, right? The visual elements matter along with the story. They're part of the storytelling you'll be doing. In addition to first impressions, it's credibility and trust, right? It's all about having a design that is cohesive, that looks like, okay, they know what they're doing here. It's clarity of information, utilizing white space when appropriate so you can guide the visual designers, the audience eyes to the right thing. The emotional impact, color has the power to evoke emotion, and the brand consistency. One band, one sound, and that includes with visual elements. So pro tip, if you have Canva Pro, if you've already done the work of getting the nonprofit free account, build out your brand kit on Canva. I respect and love graphic designers. I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are graphic designers, and they probably don't want me to say this, but this is the closest you'll get to having a free-ish graphic designer, because it'll take some time and some learning curve that you can get. And this brand kit which is only available for Pro, allows you to upload logos, brand colors, select or upload brand fonts. You can use AI, and I'm on the fence about how I feel about it, but I believe in working with it and not it happening to us. You can use AI to develop a brand voice and tone. You can upload photos that you own of your programs and initiatives. You can upload other graphics or specific branded icons, and it simplifies those design decisions for you. It ensures consistency and it speeds up creation. You can even save templates. And so that means that if you have someone who's a volunteer who wants to help, and they were like, I would love to design stuff, this brand kit can allow you to open a template, click on the brand kit, and turn anything instantly into your brand: colors, fonts, voice. And so this is probably the most valuable thing I'll share if you haven't already done this in this presentation, is definitely utilize the brand kit as a free pro feature. Elevating your visual presence. So templates are your best friend. Use a template. Unless you have a background in professional design or even a hobbyist background, the templates are going to give you that framework that a professional designer, how they would do layout without you having to start from scratch. How can you find those templates? In the search bar. Some prompts that worked for me while I was building out Roots and Rhythm as an example. I searched one-page impact report, and you'll see what I created. And I used that. I also searched in the search bar annual report, which gave me several pages, but I was able to find the one page that would align with the kind of design style and delete the others. And then make sure to make it your org's own. Make sure every element serves the purpose of your message, and remove anything that doesn't add value. So if the template has 15 photos and you only want to show 3, delete the others. Make sure that it speaks to your story and your organization well. And clarity and impact. I'm not going to go over all of these, but it's 2 things that are very important to me. Visual and text balance. You want to have maintain a healthy balance between visuals and text to tell the story, and it should visually engage, but it should not take away from the overall focal point or message. And then the use of white space. We are tempted to use every inch of the one pager. I know, because you have a strong story, and I'm being serious. We all have amazing stories and we want to share it, right? But use that white space to make sure that readability is better, that accessibility is better, and then also that the important information stands out. So make sure you have that space. I break the rules sometimes. I try not to for accessibility reasons, but sometimes, and you'll see, I'll have fonts, they'll be 10 instead of 14 or 16, but I wouldn't go as low as 6 or 7, which I've seen, and that's actually distracting. So you get more information in, but you don't make it easy to read. And then image selection. Nothing beats your own photos, right? Always, we all have a smartphone of some sort at this point. So let's use those smartphones. Let's look up rule of thirds and Google that and start thinking about how we can frame. Let's, if we have it in the budget, have photographers. Let's engage pro bono photographers if they are willing to offer their services. If not, if you get this Canva for nonprofits or just buy a pro account, they will give you access to a stock photo library that has high resolution photos. So you don't have to worry about pixelation, especially if you scale or print. And then you can also go to other platforms like FreePic or Unsplash, where they have commercial-free stock footage. Canva is your best resource for Canva. When you log on, you'll see the Canva templates in the Magic Studio, which is all of their AI capabilities. And then you also can go to their YouTube. This is how I started to feel like a designer personally. Their YouTube is amazing. And most of their videos are under 10 minutes. They are speaking to the busy folks. They are speaking to those of us like myself with short attention spans, and it really can elevate your design capabilities in a short time. Use those resources developed by Canva. let's go to Canva. So I'm going to have a little share out. Let me go here. So we had roots and rhythm. And we kind of talked about some of the elements that we want to include in our one pager. And this is what I created in Canva. So I don't know, I want to make sure, can everybody see this screen? This is the one sheet. I wanted to have visual elements, but I didn't want to overwhelm anyone. And so I thought one of the best ways to do that was to highlight some of the photos. These are all stock, by the way, since we're using it as an example. Highlight some of the photos of our organization in action with these overlays that showcase the variety of programs we have. I also, one tip that I learned from a mentor, a great executive director, is bolding and highlighting key takeaways naturally draws our eyes there. So this is part of our brand colors. It's the same color as Roots, but if nothing else, I want folks to see this like rust color, and I want the funder to see the growth we've had. I want them to see the direct ask we have here, and what their funding is going to go to. So I made sure in the areas where I had a lot of text to highlight the main takeaways. One page is not enough to have a full testimonial, but you have to have that emotional element. Remember, that's one of our cores of storytelling. And so I pulled out a pull quote from a participant, and that is impactful in a way that still evokes that emotional element of storytelling without taking up too much space. I also want to showcase my footprint in the community. So I mentioned how many community events we have with partners and listed some community partners to showcase that I am an active member of this arts ecosystem with a variety of other organizations. The data points, they are here under our impact. So I went in my narrative and found the 3 most compelling data points, right? And I pulled those out and made sure that they were visible. If the funder, if the audience, if a visitor to anything, if you had these just printed out and they don't see anything else, they'll see those numbers. And so you want to make sure that those are compelling and front and center. The ask is here, and this is hard to squeeze all of this in, but the ask is here and the vision is below it. So always make sure you have that futurist mindset of the vision and the ask. And at the very bottom, we have our social profiles, because we want you to learn more about us. We want you to be fully engaged. And this is a relationship builder, right? This one sheet is, hey, we're inviting you to our conversation, not the other way around. And then I have the website. In this case, it would be better to have like the director of development, the CEO, even if it's something vague like partnerships at Roots and Rhythm at the bottom, so the funder can follow up with questions and have a direct contact. I can share out this template since, like I said, I just made it in Canva. And just to give you an idea of some of the elements that are here, and you'll be able to move them around and make a copy. But I used the logo. And one thing that is great in Canva is that if you have the logo here, it pulls the colors. So you can use your text if you want to, like, they already know that I'm looking for children's dance programs. So they're giving me different elements from graphics to photos to even videos, which is great. And these are all pro only features. So if you want to make a quick social media video, now you have free video content you can use to shapes. Well, they don't have any for children dancing. And then you can go to brand kit and you can set up logos. This is my personal brand kit, but you see all the fonts here. You can upload those, multiple logos. So they pop right in when you click on it. That's easy to do. And then if you want to change the colors, it pulls all the colors here from your organization, or it'll pull directly from your brand kit if you'd like it to do so. There are a lot of options with photos as well. So you have the option to go get a design element. Let me take a photo. And you're like, I love this picture, but it's taking up way too much space. You're going to adjust the layer here and bring it forward, or bring it to the front rather. and you're like, I need this background gone. The AI capabilities of Canva are great. So you can still have a great compelling photo and now you can put it in the corner. That's what I did with this picture here, where it still has a great visual impression, but it doesn't take up all the space it did previously. You also have the option to have Canva upscale low res images. So say you have a great picture at an event last year, but it's kind of blurry. It can upscale logos that aren't high res and images. So you have some opportunities there to really play around with the AI capabilities of Canva. If you don't like this template, you can always go and look up other templates like annual report, and you can find different templates. And if you hover over them, you'll see how many different pages you can pick from. And any of these pages could be the right layout for your one pager. So you have options there. You can also type in nonprofit, and you can find nonprofit specific impact reports that will really actually be framed already in the line of strategic thinking as if you're talking to a donor. So you have a lot of options here, and you can customize all of these to your brand's needs, fonts, language. Canva is really a nonprofit saving grace. They also have one-page impact reports as well. So they're already thinking in the mindset of folks who might just have one page. So I would, really welcome y'all to explore Canva, particularly if you have a pro account, to see the different capabilities. We can go back to the presentation and jump into customizing for funders. So do your research. Now you have the Canva one-pager elements. You know what you want to do. You want to have that modular messaging that keeps your organization's voice and tone consistent, but you also want to have, in the CRM, your person of contact at, which foundation, what are their funding priorities for the next few fiscal years, and then adjust that messaging on your one-pagers or or any of your funding proposals. What should you track? I get this question a lot. And I would say track everything. If there was a way, if you had a building to track the average minutes spent by a visitor, I would say track that, right? And I'm sure there's some very expensive program that does that, but program specific metrics, the general demographic information, growth and engagement, year-over-year growth in terms of funding, outreach, impact, engagement levels, to find out that you've tripled your volunteers over 10 years. That's impressive. So make sure that you're tracking your volunteers, your long-term volunteers. They just don't make for good stories. Well, we've had this 40-year volunteer. They also make for good metrics. And then quantitative outcomes, attendance and population, educational outreach, community engagement. So the community-led projects, festivals that you do with other organizations, the diversity of the participants. Qualitative outcomes, so testimonials, case studies, also, some of your artists and stakeholder feedback. So if you have collaborators, if you have teaching artists that are contractors, getting that feedback so you know when to pivot and how to improve your programs, and also using those for testimonials, that's great. Obviously, financial metrics and funding sources, budget utilization, and then organizational capacity. The details on the number and qualifications of your staff and volunteers. I always tell folks that I've had grants that have popped up and I really need a bio and a resume from a staff member, and they're on their honeymoon. So if you have volunteer staff members, board members that are so important to your funding, and like you use them in proposals, make sure almost, you can determine the cadence, but I would do it on a quarterly basis to have updated headshots, bios, information, anything that can lend itself to a funding proposal or even a one sheet. And then also you want to talk about your organization's collaborations, partnerships with other organizations, state and, regional organizations that enhance your credibility as an organization and your reach. So I talked a lot, but I got it done within an hour so we can have some conversation and some of the Q&A questions. So right now I'm going to welcome you to drop any questions you may have in the Q&A and in the chat, but also review that at the beginning, I asked everybody to write a summary, a one-sentence summary of your goal if it got funded. Now, with all the talking I was doing, if you are brave enough to showcase the before and after and rewrite that one sentence, I would love to see it in the chat. Also, as I said, I am a slow cooker and not a toaster. If you are too, and you're like, wait, I had a question, feel free to email me. I geek out about this if you can't already tell. I love, love, love talking about marketing, communications, and fundraising. So I would love to hear from you and also get feedback from you as well. And yeah, I'll open it up to the chat and the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Incredible, a lot of information, really exciting, and thanks for sharing such great strategies and such great thinking. So much to ponder in that aspect, and we do have a couple of questions that I think this first one is we'll get to go from Yuru. One page usually how many words? So if you can give some context as to how much should they be thinking about per words and content versus images on that one page?
Sure. It's hard to say a word count, especially because if you're like thinking about margins, right? So when you're getting to the design element, you might not have the like 1 inch on each side. So that allows you to have more content. I would say if you're going to do paragraphs, make sure that the paragraphs take up no more than 1/3 and break it up into the other 2/3 into infographics, bulleted point list. Make sure that you have some variety there. But if you're just doing plain text, no more than 1/3. If you have a like historical organization, you're like, I got to get at least half in text, have some quotes or some infographics that kind of cut and break that up.
Thanks, Jessica. Also, I'm like for some of that, we recognize that there's like history and mission might actually be part of a second pager. I'm like, there's the history and mission is one page, and then one page in relationship to the proposal and to the particular kind of component, because I think that there's going to be some of that aspect where know who your target audience is again, but also I love the idea of 1/3 text. I'm like, that hurts me. I got to tell you, that hurts me a lot. I'm like, I got a lot more words than that in that aspect. We actually also had a question from Sneha. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. As a new organization that has limited data points from programs, how would you suggest addressing community impact and program evaluation?
Sure. So you're going to have the anecdotal that you have to lean on heavily. So that really means talking to your program participants, getting their information, following up with them, doing pre and post event surveys. And also, this is an opportunity to show how strategic you are. So if you don't have those data points, what information do you want to collect? Are there softwares that you need to buy and they're $20,000? Like what can help you collect that information as a new organization? So you could think strategically and provide a vision for that, as well as in the meantime, lean on the anecdotal data that you have.
Thanks so much. Again, like just reinforce, you all have a vision. How, like, what is important to you? What is important to making sure that that vision actually happens, and think about what's important to your story. And then you'll also figure out share your one pages with other folks and see what they actually see, what they collect. That would be a great aspect. We also have I'm going to go to some questions around what adjustments would you make in storytelling and strategy for fiscally sponsored projects that are more temporary and might not have historical data as a nonprofit organization, but seek to make a similar impact?
Sure. So for those, I think you really need to tie into why this project is important to the local community, right? And what can come from it and what can grow out of it, whether it's collaborations, or say it's an annual conference or something like that, where you're like, we have one big event a year, so how do I continue to have that conversation? Or it's a one-time thing. All of those can lean on what's the relevance to the moment, both in the local context, both in the arts world and the timeliness of news. If it's an art exhibit or art gallery that's responding to the moment, you're going to have to lean on that relevance.
Thanks for that. Hopefully that answers the question. Again, also, for people who like, if people don't care if it's a fiscally sponsored project or not, if your audience doesn't care, it doesn't matter. Just show what the importance of your project is. Like it
Yeah.
only matters if that's an important thing to whoever is going to be seeing this work. But focus on who do you think is their audience and why that's important to them.
Oh, and Sixto, I can jump in with that. You're 100% right. I am working with the organization that nobody knows who they're fiscally sponsored by, and it doesn't like add to their credibility because it's like this random Nebraska like foundation. So you don't have to like say, oh yeah, well, this is a fiscally sponsored project. They're there for you and what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I guess that leads to just in like, to me, that also brings a question. Don't put information on your one sheet that's going to ask a question you don't want to answer.
Yep.
So that's the other point where like, if you're going to be talking about a fiscal sponsor, don't bring up a fiscal sponsor if nobody else needs to know about it, because that's a whole conversation and people that's leaving a whole other thing that you want. You going back to what is impactful work that you want them to be left with in that space. Sneha has a couple of comments around design, I think, in the Q&A. One was a great suggestion for the on color psychology for the presentation materials. So great, thanks for lifting that up. And also, they also talk about for brand image creation with generative AI. Currently, I don't think there's any copyright infringement constraints. However, something to be aware of in the future as AI policies evolve.
Absolutely. I'm not a fan of AI, but a lot of colleagues said, Jessica, you can't let it happen to you. I would not use Canva's image creator. One, because it's not good. You're going to have 18 fingers on one of your participants in their programming. So don't use it. The other capabilities, like the image enhancer, like if you have a logo that your friend made 5 years ago that is not in a vector form and needs to be like, cleared up, like use that. But I would recommend against using the image creator because a lot of times they do steal from other artists, and in the spirit of being creatives on this call, we don't want to contribute to that.
Thanks for that. Other questions, please drop them in the chat or in the Q&A window. But Jessica, you've also talked about a consistency of ideas and making sure that the images and the language come together and make sure that that also reinforces the brand and the brand, like what is the purpose of the organization or your project. So I think that that's always an important thing to make sure that if you are lively, go for being lively. Make sure that that's part of it. If you are an academic institution that needs to have more research oriented, then think about what that is in that space. Recognize also who your audience is, making sure that if your audience is a church and pastors of the church, make sure that that actually relates directly to what works for them and not necessarily. Definitely don't utilize those AI photos for that because you don't know what's going to be happening in this component. So again, I think that like thanks for these great the consistency of it. I think one of the things that you also one point that I actually love for you is that it's that you said it's not about not general operating but capacity building, and I think it's great to think about all of this is about investment in your future. Even what we've talked about for the BIPOC Arts Fund, even for this aspect, it is what is your vision and how are you building to your future? I think that that's really talking about, that is the capacity building that will be exciting for folks and how what their investment in you would actually be able to help make happen with other folks and in the future.
Absolutely. I'm not gonna say I loved grant writing, but I like dreaming of what can happen. And adding strategy to that. And so while it feels overwhelming, I think that's the approach and the lens that I approach funding proposals in is what could happen if it all goes right? And how can I be strategic in putting the tactics there and the vision there so funders can see that?
I love that. I mean, I think that it goes very much along what we have been talking about with all of our resource initiatives and initiatives is dream big, dream ambitiously, make sure, and then and plan for that. How do you plan for that big dream? I think part of what we also have seen is that so many of us have been conditioned to just figure out how to survive. And this is actually a moment in order to be able to dream big. And I mean, one of the things is that we do live in Texas and people love big ideas and big visions. So how do you not only have that big vision, but also know how do you get that strategy to get there? How we can bring other folks into this moment? I guess the other part for me, when you said about some of that, is that when you're talking about what it can accomplish, to me, I am going to say that please be honest, please be truthful, because that's essentially a contract. What they see in these things is that if I can double, and if I give you $20,000 and you can double all this aspect, then I'm assuming that you're going to double all this aspects. And so be clear. You can be ambitious, but also be also somewhat like, how do you actually share some of that so that there's a bit of space for you to understand what that process is and that what the timeline is for some of those aspects. So be honest, but be positive.
Yes.
Okay.
And the worst thing is a year later seeing that email asking for the grant report and you know that you didn't hit any of your metrics. So let me tell you something, all scale is an impact. There's other ways to do impact other than I can triple something. So think about impact as a priority over scale necessarily.
Awesome. Karis, other ideas, other things that you wanted to lift up or responses?
You know, I do not. I'm just in awe, not only of the two of you, but coming together to share the resource. There's so much good information. I hope that people will play this back and hear about not necessarily doubling up scale and color and placement. Like there's just so much within this workshop that I myself am listening as if I'd never heard it before. And like I don't do this kind of work. And so it was just really, really great. And I hope that people really tap into the resource that we've provided here. And I can't wait to see some of these one sheets that are coming out.
Awesome. Absolutely. Because also like there are a lot of notes like, oh, right, I don't do that part well. I'm like, oh, those are the things. Oh, Jessica, why do you see me so well? And tell me what are the guiding questions in this kind of component? I have been doing this for 30 years. I have been writing and doing all of this aspect, and I can continue to improve and continue to like and also the environment also shifts. And I need to make sure that my skills, my understanding actually shifts with what the needs are of this environment. So I thank you, Jessica, for sharing such great content and also giving us, I think, a lot of evergreen ideas about how to continue to think about it in relationship to what your purpose is and what impact that has, and giving that type of focus on this really, it will never go out of style. It will never go out of being important in that component. And for all of us with the BIPOC Arts Network and Fund, that is the truth that we would love for you to lift up. That is the truth that we want you to live in so that we can continue to celebrate it and that you get to be celebrated not just by us, but by your potential donors, your potential audience members, and your friends who can also could say congratulations. These one pages are also moments of celebration for yourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And best of luck to all of you, truly. Create something great with your one pagers, get creative. And like Sixto said, which was great, this is a celebration of your initial vision, that one spark you had to do something. So this is exciting.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Sixto.
Thanks, Karis. Thanks, everybody. Are there any last questions? Otherwise, we're gonna.
I see a raised hand.
Yeah, Yuru, you want to throw it into can you just go ahead and throw it into the chat?
Oh, you know, they may have been waving.
Oh, I didn't think about
I'm
that.
not sure. Yuru, if there's a question, can you throw it into the chat in this moment? If recognizing the time, if any of y'all need to go, thanks. Jessica, we are going to be able to post this up and share this. Is that correct? Great.
Yes.
I will have this is recorded. We'll be able to share some of this information and slides with folks. And I will email all the people who registered with that information. It'll most likely take the end of the week. don't expect it. It ain't gonna happen today. So I'm gonna put that reality out there. But yes. Okay, I guess if there was a question, that would be great. Otherwise.